drop it. I've got a mic up. You don't need a mic. Doesn't need a mic. So I've painted some Orc Commandos. I know, not Space Marines. This is tabletop standard, but with a bit of something. I've gone for a really high focus, kind of like right here. The idea being that these... Oh, see you later. It's very hot here. I'm surprised he's hung around as long as he had. Anyway, yeah. So I've done my usual. I love my Halford's grey primer. It really sticks well. And then I'm using a white ink. So the idea with these was just to make them look super duper sneaky, as Kommandos will want. They're hidden in the shadows, and here we are. Bang, this is a highlight right in the face, right down the barrel of the gun. So I've taken that zenithal highlight, just taken that angle down from more of a generic here's the sun down to more of a confined light source. So almost like non-metallic metal. Pulled that highlight rather than being on a generic sphere. It would be more even, and the blend would be even across that shape. Very dark in the sides, quite a solid base colour through this kind of 2/3, and then super tight highlight towards the top and the centre. So the light on the end of your gun has lit my model as he's leapt out at the last second. You see the glint of the knife, the red eyes, teeth, and then you die if the dice allow, which they really do. But we can hope. Yeah. Acrylics and oils. Bish bash bosh. So you can see I've focused on the face, that side of the axe, the top, but quite a bit on the front of his pistol, a little bit there on the knee, just because it's facing upwards. You know, pick out the characterful bits. Pause for a bit of chuchin, and then onto some Magos purple. This is, you know, my nadir shading. I'm using this because it gives a really nice bit of colour to the shadow, but also kind of gives that fleshy musculature, gives the green some life. I'm working through each model 2-3 times, so I'll kind of like chain through, go back, go to the next one, go back, go to the next one, go back, so that there's 2-3 coats on those. You can see that's the little droppers that I use. I just really like them for getting paint out of a pot, something that's not got a dropper. Don't worry about putting all your GW paints into dropper bottles, just get some of them, way cheaper, you don't waste it all. So just mixing up some of that fluoro and a green from my flesh tones. So I'm just using this, it's got a little dish on the bottom of this jar. I just find it a convenient little spot. I can show the camera what's going on, I can mix my paint on it. It's a fairly generic green that I reckon I can replicate. With colours like this, if I'm doing an army, I'll mix up loads, I'll put it in a bottle, like I did with my Alpha Legion stuff. But for a kill team like this, where, you know, there's a bit of skin variety on each of them anyway, I don't mind if I don't nail it exactly the same at a later date if I should add another dude into the roster. But there you go, there's another one of those little pipettes. Really handy. I also use them for getting the paint out of the airbrush. Take the bulk of it out. It gives you less paint to flush through and clean out. So that was that mix. A black, green and a fluoro yellow. Fairly generic orc flesh. Just testing it. And then I will, surprise, surprise, paint all the green bits. You know how that's going to go. Bit of that pale blue in there. Managed not to pour that everywhere. And that is going to go over our zenithal in those areas that are still just a tiny bit lighter they give me a really nice guide for where I'm going to add these colours. Off we go. Zip through them. Then onto the black 2.0. I love this stuff. It's just really nice and matte. Some nice small brushes. I'll keep as big a one as I can until I need to swap. I tend to go around the model with a big brush and leave the hard to reach areas. It's really tempting to try and do too much with a big brush. Try and resist. Just showing you here on the burner boy that I did. I'm glazing in the black a little bit just to get more transition on this guy. He's a little bit more technical than some, but it's a good example. I'm just thinning that paint down and blending it across some of those surfaces because his light source is going to be coloured with the airbrush later on, and I just wanted some of those dark parts still to read as black or very dark, but I wanted some of that black undertone so that I can then glaze over these airbrush colours, the flame yellow, orange and red from the bottle, and then I drop it. There you go, there's a bit of that blending just down the side of the gun. That's a combination of the zenithal and the glaze of the black. Swapping over to some dry brushes. I've got some nice little round ones, and then a collection of crappy older ones, and then quite a stiff one. Try out different brushes on different surfaces for different textures. So that's, a very stiff brush if I want to just drag it over quite a flat surface and just catch the edges. Some smaller ones for those hard to reach areas, smaller pieces. I've got quite a selection there. Just getting rid of those other brushes. This is all burnt iron. Pretty much just use this burnt iron and then a generic light silver. This is again why I like airbrushing and dry brushing on this lining paper as a backdrop. You can rub your paint on that. You can see what's going on. You can see the motion I'm doing there, front to back. If you're unsure how much paint you got left on it, drag it over your thumb. You can see how much. It will dry nice and quick on your thumb. So the direction of travel there is the direction of the light. The dry brush starts at the front and moves back. Starts at the front, moves back. Or starts at the top and moves down. Then you'll pick up the top of it. There are exceptions where I go up and down. That's where I just want to kind of get a good coat of silver across the whole thing. But you can see I've been quite deliberate with the direction of travel and getting off most of the cat here. Next, smoke. Really like this colour. It's like a dark chocolate. And this will go over some of the leather parts, over bits on the knees, bits of the boots. I'm just breaking up any particularly large blocks of black colour, picking out a few bits. The packs are predominantly brown. There's lots of shoulder straps like leather braces, so they get some work. Stippling it on, painting it smoothly, being conscious of where I put the brush and where I drag it and then lift it up, dragging to where I want more pigment to land, and then we fly through it with a bit of documentary on. Next, just adding a bit of pale sand into that smoke colour. It's quite a bit lighter. It's that toffee colour there. Sorry I didn't get a good focus shot on it. I thought I did. Now this is a glaze. It's quite watered down. It looks like I've really overdone it, but as it dries, it calms down a bit. Quite a step in contrast, but again, that is the nature of what I'm looking for here, is big jumps for a more contrast. This will all get toned down somewhat with the oil wash that's going to come later. Bit of a boo-boo here. Magos contrast. I thought I was going to put that on their hats, which I base coated in pale grey, but they ended up being far too light, and I got it all later with an oil paint. Then, because these guys are Death Skulls, some blue, put on the colour of your choosing, but I thought the blue was a good choice. Across the way from both green and purple, it sits in that triad of colours. It's very different from those other two. Stippling on here, again, I'm not afraid of a bit of texture and some lumps. This is a ragged old orc weapon that's been dragged around many a battlefield. Could well have been torn off the side of an Imperial tank some decades or hundreds of years prior. I'm wet blending some of these colours, adding lighter blues and a bit of pale sand. I'm showing you the footage all on this one guy, but I've done pretty much the same thing on the rest of the kill team, picking out little bits that could do with a contrasting colour, a little spot colour. For example, the little teacups there, got to have a brew, wash down your Imperial Guardsman's guts. Om and om and om. A little bit extra going on the Burner Boys banner. Just did a wet blend across there, so I'm slapping this paint on across the whole surface. Then I get a little bit darker one, and before anything gets a chance to dry, I can merge those colours across, get more contrast across there. I'll hit just that far edge, the furthest side away, facing away from his burning Molotov cocktail. So I've put a bit of a varnish across these guys. It's satin, I didn't have any gloss, but what it's going to do is help the oil washes that I'm doing run more into the recesses. The super matte black paint will, because it's quite textured, hold a lot of the oils anyway, and the satin, I'm putting just a thin wash on, will just help it run across those other acrylic paints. I'm putting, yeah, I know those are huge. I got big oils for painting props and sets and stuff. You won't need that much, just use the standard small ones that you'll see next to. That's a bit of the linseed oil. It's like the medium for the oil paint. That one must have been sitting on a shelf for a while. You can see I've got a bit of pink and white. I've got a black and a brown. My Sansador thinners. I think I put a bit of magenta on there because that's what's going to go on those little beanies of theirs. And then I liberally slop it on. There's the beanies getting a proper punchy colour. It covers really nicely. And I don't think my time with the base colour was wasted. The Magos purple might have been, and it's wasted time painting the whole lot of them. But in the long run, at least I know for next time, that's not a good combo. You live and learn, eh? Right, you don't need to see me painting all these hats. This is a nifty little device I picked up from the art shop. It's just a little jar with a little clip down lid. You can wash your brushes in your spirits there, and you can see the pigment just drops down and you get a pretty clean brush. When I'm done with each project, I'll go and give them a good cleaning. I'll use a bit of soapy water to get the last of the paint residue away and condition them, point the bristles right. Just cleaned off the bit of that magenta, and then eventually it took a couple of tries. I made up a dark brown with a bit of the black, and that pretty much goes everywhere bar the caps. Again, you probably don't need me to see. You don't need to see me doing every brush stroke, because I am pretty much toshing it on. The only thing I do is not let it pull too deeply. But then again, I do push it into the depths, those kind of awkward spots behind the body and the backpack. After I've done all of them, I whip out the paper. Yeah, there's my dirty old cutting mat, and that's why I like to put a bit of paper down. I've also put the basing material, Astrogranite, I think they call it. They look okay at this point, but obviously, you know, a bit flat. We can get some more life into those flesh tones and find that zenithal underneath all that wash. So here's the Q-tips or cotton buds. I put a tiny bit of thinner there. Again, this is just so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm literally just wicking up the tiniest bit, and then almost like you're dry brushing, just making sure there's as little as possible on that Q-tip, I can then rub it gently across the surface. Any issues you ever have with paint coming off, it's because you've rubbed it too hard. The paint wasn't dry enough. It's not because oils and acrylics are having issues chemically with each other. So just be very gentle. You can see the cotton bud there gets grubbier. Pull away the dirty bit and the cat hair and the fluff. You'll see in a second I actually soften up the cotton buds a little bit. Sometimes they can be rock hard. Just roll them in your fingers. Give them a little poke on the desk and they'll soften up a little bit, and you're again less likely to damage your model. So just flipped over the other end there, tiniest bit, making sure I haven't got too much, and then again just working in the direction of the light fall, much like the dry brushing, front to back, top to bottom, just taking it off where you want a bit more highlight, and you want to reveal the lighter colours underneath. You can see it lifting off their magenta there and showing some of the lighter colour under the hat. Just like the way oils sit over metallic paints. It's almost like a oily bit of metal should be done with metal and oil. Fancy that. So you can see there I've left the majority of it and just taken it off of the high spots. Revealing a bit of the blue stuff there that was almost obliterated by the oils. So this is what I was saying a moment ago, just give them a little squeeze. Soften them up a little bit. There we go, you've got much more flex. You're much less likely to rub your oil paint so hard that you get the acrylic underneath. So now, this is the pink, which I'm just putting a tiniest bit of white in, just to lighten it. And this is just going on knuckles, noses, an elbow, I think, an elbow in the whole lot. And this gets applied with a small brush in that kind of quite liberal fashion. Don't have to be overly precise, but this is just to give that green a little bit of fleshy tone to it. And here you see I got the dark brush, that's a slightly different one, and similar to the cotton bud, it's just got the absolute tiniest bit of spirit on it, and I am just blending it, moving that pigment from its initial position and softening it. I'll do it again on this one, see if we can see it better. Just across those cheeks, on the nose, and a little bit more on the lips here because they're a bit more pronounced. You can see it looks quite stark there, but then with a blend you can see how much softer it is. So that's the Astra Granite, and I put that on using the old cotton buds. When the cotton's dirty, just sharpen them up a little bit and you can push it around with it. At this point, I have mattified them again. All of my oils are dry overnight. They get a matte varnish, and just to give a little bit more contrast onto those hats again, I want to go a little bit darker still. I've put some Magos purple, some black Templars contrast, and a bit of the matte medium, and then just slapped it over the hats. Just painting hats. You know what that looks like. I've done it once already. This is my red flesh tone. This is going to go on the tongues, a little bit on the teeth and the eyes. So some of the eyes and tongues where the oil had sat on them a bit, I might have put a bit of pale sand just to lighten them up. But this is quite a light red. It's got a pop to it. I will then mix a bit of pale sand for the lighter tones. When you are painting eyes, try and get as many points of contact. So you can see one hand is resting on the table and then both hands are touching each other and the model. Now I'm really steady. I've taken a deep breath, slow my breathing. I make sure I've got access to all the parts. I'm not going to hit that cheek accidentally, and then I slowly poke at it. Same thing, flip the model so that again I can get a nice motion. I'm not going across the nose, I'm going from one side of the nose to the side of the face. I've got easy access. I'm far less likely, not impossible, to get it right. Whew, one shot, one kill. If only that were true with orcs. So there we go, here's the pale sand going in, just for a lighter section. So this I will use just to lighten up the centre of the eye. I will also hit bits of the cheek for a highlight, a little bit on the nose. I think I even put some on some nails. What this does is act as an undercoat, so that then in a moment when I pop Blood Angel's contrast over the top of them, you get some depth. That pink dot will look like a light red dot. The contrast will go over that other red, and they just look alive because it's got that depth and the translucency that the contrast paint gives. They look super dark because that contrast sits in the recesses, and then if you come out with a slightly watered down version of that onto the cheek, it gives them a bit of a glow, like those eyes are glowing a little bit as the light catches them. I put some of that red on the flame and some of the red on these oil drum full of horrible burning stuff. I've just thinned that out a little bit just to put a little bit of a red tone over some of the black, so that it's not just solid black. Nothing in nature really ever is solid black. There you go, so there's that pink going on some nails. Some of those just needed a little bit of lifting. Either I'd missed them the first time round, or the oils had covered them too much. You can always go back. Painting is not a system where you go from beginning to end. Sometimes you loop back a little bit and move forward again. Right, now the fluoro yellow. So we've got our green base and a little bit of white ink. That fluoro yellow and a little bit of white ink, I'm just putting a very light yellow, you can see how pale that is, over the flames, just to blend from the red over the white. And that gives us a nice desaturated, not quite burnt out. This one's a bit kind of an aside. I'm picking up the colours I've already got in front of me. I've put a bit of that red Blood Angels into my yellow just to get some orange tones in there, and just re-establishing some more darkness in the very recesses just behind that strap there. Putting a bit of Rushi Violet in there, and so under some of those little muscle groups down his side. Some of the paint has made its way around that contoured shape, despite my best efforts. Just a little kind of dark line to the edges and recesses. That's coming along nicely. Now this is a bit of, I don't think it's pure white. It might be a bit of pale sand with a bit of that white ink, so it's very nearly white, and that's just going on the very tippy-toppiest points and the corner of his eye. Again, this might not be technically exactly where the light would be falling, but it just helps pick out the points. Really liking the way that feels. I've watered that down ever so slightly just to lift some of those points a bit more. You can see it's a glaze, and in a second when it's dry you'll see those are a little more subtle. There you go. Dead chuff with that. So this is the other metal colour, exhaust manifold. And I've got a little bit of a lighter silver, and with the two of these I'm just doing a highlight. So I put on my base metal colour that we dry brushed earlier, then there's the oils, now just the tiniest highlights, again with our similar principle, super focused on that kind of the very zenith of each of the objects. A highlight, and then a tiny even smaller one, just a dot here and there with the lighter silver that I mix up in a second. So that was the highlights on the metals. Now the highlights on the flesh. This is the fluoro paint, which is kind of like a semi-translucent gel. So it sits really nicely over the orc green flesh. The green shows through, but where we layer it up, it gets almost to its yellow. And weird shaky camera thing going on there. Don't know what that was, sorry. So they look nearly done. Only thing to do is dry brush the bases. What I've done here is, again, direction of light. I hit the base rims, the angle section, with an airbrush, just pushing a shadow in from the edge. And then the dry brush just goes over the top, just to establish the direction of light again. So let's clear the space and get some terrain out, show you what we got. There they are, lurking from the shadows. That's your sniper boy, following on behind the knob. The burner, tiny little gobbo. Burner again, just showing him from different angles. There he is again. This fella, he's having fun. Really pleased with the direction of light on that one. The one big eye glowing out. There's another shooter lad. Again, living his best life. Love this guy's beanie pushed back on his head. This guy's got a flashy pistol, eh? And there they are, lined up under a punchy light. The kind of light you might see, in a games club. So they're black, but they've got a bit of something in there. The green really pops out. The purple and red stand out nicely, and those little blue accents. But I really wanted them to be super dark. And I think we've achieved that. There's the knob. He's a good lad. Very pleased with that. That axe looks great with the oils over the blue paint. Again, in the terrain, they do look like they would be camouflaged. 40k setting. So there we go. Don't be afraid of oils. Don't be afraid of oils and acrylics. As long as you don't rub too hard, said the actress to the bishop, you'll be okay. What else do I want to say? Constrained palettes, dark black but not jet black. There's always a bit of green and purple in there, you can see, especially on the burner boy. Loving the flesh tones. Do like the glow on the eyes as well. There he is. He was asleep through most of that. Just in hiding from the rain that we get here in the summer, while the rest of Europe's on fire. I hope you're not on fire. Cheers. Like and subscribe, you know. Thanks. And then I drop it.